The 540 is brought to you by StarCityGames.com weekly sale. Go to StarCityGames.com/sale because this week you can save 20% off on all basic lands. So if you are looking to make a nice upgrade across your entire cube with the basic lands of your choice, this is the time to do it. Get back to basics with this weekly sale. Save 20% off on all basic lands now until May 24th at 10:59 a.m. Again, that's StarCityGames.com/sale. The 540 is also brought to you by Coalesce Apparel and Design. If you want to get the coolest Magic t-shirts and hoodies and stickers, go to coalesceapparel.shop. And if you find something you like, use gift code SCG to save 10% off at checkout. That's coalesceapparel.shop. Nobody made what they wanted, so they made it themselves.
What's up, everybody? Cedric Phillips here, stopping by real quick to let you know about one of Star City Games' newest podcasts, The Receivables, hosted by yours truly, alongside my partner in crime, of course, Patrick Sullivan, where the two of us discuss Magic sets, both past and present, from top to bottom. On every episode of The Receivables, you're going to hear us talk about the facts of a set, the mechanics of a set, the cycles of a set, you know, the boring stuff, before we get into some crazy stories of when we were playing Magic during the times that the set was legal. We've got a ridiculous award show where we give out awards like the Char Rumbler Award for weirdest card in a set, the Oko Thief of Crowns Award for best card in the set, and a whole bunch more, before we finally decide, hey, what card won the set and what letter grade should we give the set? It's a whole lot of fun. We're having a blast recording them. Hopefully you have the opportunity to listen to it and you enjoy it as much as we're enjoying recording them. Where can you find it? StarCityGames.com or wherever else you listen to your podcast. The Receivables every single week here at SCG.
Welcome back, everyone, to the 540, which is definitely the number of cards in at least one of the cubes we're going to be talking about today. I'm Justin Parnell. You can find me on Twitter at jparnell1, and of course, my co-host that contains the majority of the information of all things cube.
That would be Ryan Overturf. You can find me at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter. And yes, at least one of the cubes we talk about today will be 540 cards. So bringing it back home.
Yeah, if all of these cards, all of these cubes that we were talking about today were 600 cards, we would be obligated to change our name. But since at least one is 540, we will continue on with the 540 as it is the premier number for cubes, loved by at least one person on this podcast, and it's not me. So you can narrow that down however you want.
Real quick, I do want to apologize. I had some technical difficulties. I'm on a different computer. I right now can really hear the fan on this computer, so that's getting picked up. I'm sorry about that, but the show must go on.
All right. Well, we're all dealing with distractions today because I also want to apologize. Currently, I'm in my office. There's a window next to my desk, and outside, my former neighbor, who's racist, sexist, transphobic, and I've never seen him wear a mask, is moving out right now. So it's not that you can hear any. It's not that you can hear any noise. I guess I'm just apologizing in case I am distracted by my fantasizing of him not being there in the future. So in case it is difficult for me to focus sometimes, that would be why.
Fair enough.
Anyway, we're talking about cubes today, as we often do, but this time, like we did a couple of months ago, we're doing a triple cube retrospective on some of the digital offerings. This time, 3 cubes over the last month on Magic Online.
Yes, yeah, it's been a busy month on Magic Online. Just back to back to back. It was not that long ago that we just had 3 cubes in a row, and they just went right back in there. I've also been getting out doing some actual paper cubes in this time, so I have been cubing just a ton.
What a time to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
As much as, it has been difficult to cube in real life over the last year, Wizards has at least thrown a bone or two when it comes to being able to cube over the internet.
Yeah, both in terms of just rolling out the vintage cube at a higher clip. We've seen that more over the last year than any year previously. Also embracing more of these spotlight cubes, giving us more looks to what the possibilities are for a cube, giving us more taste of different people's preferences and experiences, exploring that, which has been really cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I really like the kind of limited cubes, the cubes with limited card pools. So this week we are talking about two cubes one cube that is really a limited card pool, and then one which is kind of a self-induced limited card pool. So the Pioneer cube is obviously limited to Pioneer cards, and the Proliferate cube, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is self-limited, self-induced to work with cards that care about counters and among other things. So
yeah, really heavily thematic in a way that pushes you away from mini cards, even if it's not as explicit as the Pioneer cube, which we'll be starting with, which is just saying this is the set cutoff, RTR or newer, that this is what this format is.
Yep. So why don't we start with that one, because that is the one that appeared the longest ago.
Indeed, yeah, the Pioneer Online. Cube by Tom Lapilli, and it does just follow the constraints of the Pioneer constructed format. So Return to Ravnica is the oldest set in this cube, and we're going up to present day. And immediately, something that I find very amusing about this cube is later when we're talking about Legacy Cube, if you're into Vintage Cube, when it comes to Cube Draft, the power level outliers, the wackiest, the most absurd cards in a cube very often are some of the oldest cards, where in Pioneer Cube, Return to Ravnica, that block is just incredibly tame by today's standards. And the most deranged cards that have been in the Pioneer constructed format and some of the more powerful cards in this cube are the ones that have come out in the last 2 years.
Yes, looking at you, Throne of Eldraine.
Yeah, Throne of Eldraine, a major contributor there. That much is certain.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about 3 different cubes today, and it is fortunate for us that Oko is only in one of them, and maybe should be in 0, but we'll talk about that in a bit. And it's not this one. It's not in the Pioneer cube. Now, I don't know if for this cube, and Brian, you may know the answer to this question. Is it cards that are just legal in Pioneer, or cards that are in Pioneer legal sets?
I believe that we are following the Pioneer ban list. For example, we see a Golos Tireless Pilgrim here. We do not see Field of the Dead. That one is not welcome in Pioneer.
Yeah, that's what I was just checking on.
Yeah, I'm going to be open about something. In the last year, when Cube has been by far my highest engagement with Magic, and part of this is like a cascading effect of Throne of Eldraine, but there are so many cards that are just banned in multiple formats that have come out recently that aren't all banned in the same formats. There's a little bit of touch and go there that now and again, a card being on a certain ban list or being off a different one does take me by surprise.
Sure. Yeah, and it's weird with like all of these. It is difficult sometimes for me when I am trying to remember like what is banned and what, especially like some of the more recent sets. Like, because I was looking at this cube as we were asking that question, I was like, well, Omnath is in here. And I was like, wait, Omnath's not banned right in Pioneer.
Yeah, but then it is legal and lands are banned.
Correct.
That's what makes Omnath more reasonable here.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so it's and as we can see, there are no fetch lands in this cube.
Just the Fabled Passage.
Yes.
So I guess we have an Evolving Wilds too.
Just the most honest of fetch lands.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, they're the most honest. They are the most blue collar. They're really going to put your pull your I literally sleeves. I was gonna say I literally couldn't think of the word for sleeves. Pull your sleeves up and make sure you're fixing your colors regardless of the speed or realisticness for a card like that to fit into your deck, especially when we have actually a pretty good bevy of mana fixing available surprisingly in Pioneer. Not necessarily fast, doesn't always come into play untapped, but it can absolutely fix your mana.
Yeah,
along with the triomes and 5 to 6 cycles.
You end up seeing a couple of the usual suspects there. You have Shocklands, of course, going back to Return to Ravnica, and those have been reprinted again into the format. But anyway, Buddy Lands. I don't know what the SEG branding on those ones is, honestly. I've never covered a standard format, at least I don't think, where these were very popular, but like the Innistrad Clifftop Retreats or the Magic 2010 allied colored counterparts, such as Sun Petal Grove. And temples, which are okay, they show up sometimes. Pathways, which you've seen a lot recently in some of the cubes that have been on Magic Online. And then a favorite here at the 540 in the Snarls.
And Port Town and Friends.
Can't forget about Port Town.
Snarl Town.
And then some really powerful dual lands. These ones don't show up in a lot of cubes, mostly because they enter the battlefield tapped, some because they are more explicit 3-color support, but we have triomes as well.
I love triomes.
Personally hate triomes.
Oh, man. Why do you hate triomes?
I don't think that they need to be as pushed as they are. When I'm playing, when I'm drafting and they're there, I'll pick them highly. They're very good.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. I don't disagree with that because, I look at like fetid pools and I'm like, this is a perfectly reasonable land. And when I was certain that when Ikoria came out, we were going to get the enemy cycle of fetid pools and the like, and then we got something significantly better. And I was just really surprised. And it makes me kind of sad because that means I know in my heart that we're going to finish that cycle of triomes before we finish the cycle of fetid pools and friends, if ever. And I really thought those were okay. Like, I think that they're not like a high power level, but
yeah, I keep with them sometimes. I am still waiting for specifically the Grixis Triome. Don't really care about any of the other ally color ones. Take them or leave them. But Grixis Triome obviously is necessary if we're going to have all these enemy ones.
Sure. Okay, so you hate them from like, I don't think these should exist standpoint, not I enjoy cubing with these standpoint. Yeah,
and they're the sort of thing where I do think that they cube pretty well. In particular, if you're trying to have good mana, fetch lands, these open up some space that's not necessarily open otherwise. They're a good way to mitigate flooding, which I like having more stuff in cube that's good early, good late. Tap land on turn 1, cycle it in the late game if you're getting flooded. I think the confluence of a lot, arguably too much of that stuff in standard has made the gameplay a lot worse from the type of Magic that I enjoy.
Yeah.
All 3 types and cycling. There's just like a little too much going on in these lands. And I think that they're just totally playable if you just power them down in any of a number of ways.
Yeah, they don't have cycling. They don't have the land types.
Like if they just reprinted Frontier Bivouac into Ikoria, that card would have seen standard play. Like those just tri-lands would have seen standard play. Is kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. You're totally right. However, for Cube, I'm happy they exist for that format. As I have said multiple times on this show before, I will sacrifice a constructed format for Cube. I'll sacrifice a bunch of them. So if that's what it takes to get cards like this, which I think are great Cube cards, because the cost of coming into play tapped 100% of the time is certainly a cost, especially when you go up in power level and you have a lot more dual lands that come into play untapped that can fix your mana and allow you to cast stuff in the same turn. So I don't have a problem with the triomes for Cube. I love them. And when they print the other 5, I'll be jazzed for those as well.
And in truth, the triomes and any number of other things, I hated Wilderness Reclamation gameplay in Standard. I hated Omnath gameplay in Standard. Triomes contributed in these formats. So there's just one piece of the puzzle that really helped me free myself from my attachment to constructed Magic and really embrace cube draft. So for that, I do thank Triomes.
There you go. Perfect. So looking at this cube, it is pretty clear that the more recently printed cards, pretty much across the board, like the cards that were printed War of the Spark onward, are just flat out more powerful than pretty much all of the rest of the cards that came before it, which is kind of crazy because, I think when Kaladesh block for a cube environment was released, I was like, man, like a lot of really, really powerful cards in this block. Little did I know, I guess, what we were seeing in the future. But what are you looking at this cube and as you are evaluating this list prior to drafting, what was your kind of look of this is what I want to be doing to have the most successful win percentage?
So when it comes to these cubes that are just sort of format legal restrictions, obviously Pioneer is more restrictive than Legacy Cube, but we're still just talking about a good stuff cube, even if we are talking about a more limited card pool. So I'm comparing this to other good stuff cubes. I'm asking what's similar, what's different, and trying to go from there based off of what I know, what I've played with. And there are some things, I always start, I do my breakdown for my articles. I go by color, and it's almost like a meme. I chuckle a little bit every time I type it, but the white column in almost all these Magic Online cubes is like the same. They're like not more than 20 cards off. Here's a creature that attacks and blocks. Here's a sweeper. Here's a cheap removal spell. And they come in different flavors, different shapes, different sizes. But, you get a pretty quick idea that, okay, white's good at beating down, and there's probably a reasonable Azorius control deck. This is how all these cubes are. And then I'm going down the line. Blue's drawing extra cards. It's taking extra turns. It's stealing your stuff. All that stuff is powerful, even if you pay a little more than it for that kind of effect than you're used to. Black is often the most interesting color to look at because it falls off so steeply. You talk about just any cube you've ever played. It's so hard not to immediately think, all right, black cube decks. Okay, like the best thing is Reanimating Gristlebrand. What's the second best thing? I don't know. There's a lot of things I can think of that are horrible. And it's really not even clear what the second best thing is.
That's fair. I look at this and I feel like that black has a lot of competent cards, but it seems like it's going to be an excellent supporting color, but it can't stand up to pretty much what anything else is doing in this cube for being the primary focus of a deck. And it doesn't mean that it's not possible, but like when I go through and I look at a lot of these cards, the cards that have had success in constructed, and I think that's a really useful tool for format restrictive cubes that are smaller formats. So Pioneer specifically, like what has been good in Pioneer, like what has been good in Standard over the life of cards that have journeyed into Pioneer, and a lot of the black cards. Strength has been based on the fact that you have 4 of them rather than their individual power.
Absolutely. And the most successful, typically it's Rakdos, but, black, X, maybe a third color decks in Standard, in Pioneer as of late have been sacrifice decks. And just like you said, a lot of that is being able to get 4 copies. You're not going to put a Witch's Oven and a Cauldron Familiar in your cube, but even if you did, they don't come together that much in your draft. They come together even less often in your deck. Like this cube's not even playing Mayhem Devil, which is an awesome constructed card, just because you're not so likely to get all the pieces you want.
Yeah, it's really hard to assemble. And that's what it is. It's like bits of things here and there. And there are certainly some powerful cards. Ryan and I have both talked about how much we love Knight of the Ebon Legion just as a black 1-drop across cubes in general. Almost doesn't matter what they are. And it's difficult because you look at that and you're like, oh, there may be some black aggro, and it's like, I think that black is the second worst aggro color in this cube, second only to blue, which is crazy because it actually has like from a creature count, it only has one less creature than white, but white's creatures are so much more efficient and I guess more samey that you don't have to worry about well, if I get Priest of Forgotten Gods, do I need to make sure I get a Callous Blood Mage or a Woe Strider, which are already some of the better black cards, so it's not like people are just going to be continually passing those. And otherwise, you're just having to like team up things that work in like really small conjunction, but don't have like a power level to make it stand out as the primary focus of a deck. And some of the more expensive cards, some of them I think are okay, but even like I'm looking in like what black cards even at like the 4 cost and up do I really think would be good in this cube? I think Gonti's probably pretty awesome in this cube. Kalidas is just a great card across the board.
Both Massacre Girl and Massacre Worm perform pretty well, assuming that the games are about creatures, which generally there are going to be in this cube. You can see the creature sides of the breakdown of every color, generally pretty heavy. You know, blue's always pretty light, but if you find yourself in these sort of Jund type mirror matches, you get a lot of nice 2-for-1s, you get a lot of solid role players, but I'm expecting and hoping to dream bigger than that, and we always end up coming back to that one when we review green anyway. But we get to red, a lot of nice beatdown cards. You know, the mana curve looks good. You get some Planeswalkers. Honestly, red's biggest problem in recent years has been, even as the aggressive decks have gotten better, more efficient tools, a couple engine type things you can cobble together, Runaway Steamkin, Experimental Frenzy sometimes, and do some pretty cool stuff with that. But the problem is the green stuff is just scaled in a way that just asks way less of the player casting the spells. As a red player in these cubes, it is just so hard to do anything if your opponent just casts an Elder Gargaroth, especially if it's ahead of schedule.
Even if it's not.
Yeah, just
what is the best time? Yeah, that's I think the worst, if you have Elder Gargaroth in your deck for this cube, it looks like from a removal perspective, especially against green, like you're not going to be able to like, I'm gonna hold the removal for Elder Gargaroth. So either you're playing it ahead of schedule and then it's a problem, or you're playing it when you top deck it and then it's potentially a bigger problem, because then you're going to like, there's not many things that you are doing to match that with like a single card off the top of your deck. Like I'm going through and looking at all of the things, and there's a couple of Planeswalkers that could match it, like Elspeth Sun's Champion, Liliana Dreadhorde General. Maybe there's not a lot, honestly. I'm actually just going through. There's really just not a lot that matches up with it.
Right. Yeah. In terms of your own haymakers, the best thing to sort of do is. So I guess I'll just get ahead on this. My experience playing this cube, my impression reading initially, that the best deck by a very wide margin is blue-green, maybe splash a third color. Just mana and stuff. And you look at the green mana curve, it's really funny to me sometimes when I do a draft, because I'm looking for a good clip of mana acceleration. I'm taking Elvish Mystic Llanowar Elves over the overwhelming majority of cards. There's a lot of 2-mana creatures in this cube that tap for mana. I actually had the problem where I've drafted too many of these, more than not getting enough. And you do have to be a little bit mindful of that. You can't fill your deck with too much air. And if I played against a deck that was particularly good at killing my mana creatures, I would board some of them out just for some bigger effect that was harder to answer. But for my game 1 configurations, I tended to be really heavy on mana acceleration, and then just some big thing that was hard to deal with. Yeah, the Elder Gargaroth is the tip of the iceberg there. We're talking about, you mentioned Throne of Eldraine. Well, how about the Great Henge? That card can completely take over a game. the large blue effects, there's difficulty for the mono blue decks or the blue not green decks to really effectively leverage some of these cards like Alrund's Epiphany to take extra turns. Stuff like Mass Manipulation, just because quad blue can be difficult unless your mana fixing is very good. Confiscate one thing isn't always game winning. But when you're playing blue-green and you're better capable of fixing your colors, you're better capable of gaining control of more than one permanent with your Mass Manipulation, you just cast some of these spells, you just concede the early game, the opponent starts doing their thing, you get to the point where you're casting your spells that are just so much more impactful, and you do some huge thing every turn, and it's like the early game never happened.
Yeah, as long as you're not dead,
right,
you're going to win.
And when we're talking about the last 10 years of cards, the cards that just kill you are generally absent.
Yep. Looking at this, it actually seems like green is the best color by a pretty decent margin. Like there's the things that it can't do are kill creatures very easily. But the way that you deal with creatures is you draft them and put them in your deck with green because they're all green anyway.
You make a bigger creature.
Yeah. There's very few. Oh God. I was going to say, I wonder what the worst card in the queue is. I have one that I believe might be the correct answer. But there's not many cards in green that I look at and I'm like, I don't really see a deck that I'm really interested in playing that in. And there's a couple in green. And there is
a green card that jumps out at me as one of, if not the worst green cards. I'm kind of wondering, I do want to hear what you which card you are thinking of, but the card that I'm basically never looking to play off the list personally is Collected Company.
Yep. No, that was it. I hate Collected Company in Cube.
Well, it's just so random, and there's just so many things that are just awesome every time. Like, you have to dream up a pretty unreal scenario for your Collected Company to be worth my Elder Gargroth. Obviously, I spend more money or more mana than you, but my return is certainly worth it. Like Kogla Titan Ape, I want to have that card on my deck. There's a number of other 4s I want to have in my deck, like Asika's Chariot. Obviously, I'm going to be trying to play the Great Hand. That card is absurd, and each one of these better cards you put in your deck also makes your Collected Company worse.
Yep. The issue with Collected Company, and this is not just in this cube, but in cubes in general, is that it is incredibly difficult to have this replicate anything it could possibly do in Constructed.
Right.
Because the Collected Company by nature is a deck building card. Like, you are really specifically trying to identify what you want to do, what you want to have happen when you cast Collected Company in most cases. Like, you're not just casting Collected Company so you can get two random creatures out of your deck. Like, if that was the case, then you would not, if it was just like, Collected Company, just randomly select two creatures out of the deck. In Constructed, you might be able to do that because you're specifically you could set the creatures you want from 1 to 3 mana, but in this, it's just like you're just getting a smattering of things, and it's just whatever you find off of the top of your deck. And sometimes, and I would say at a pretty decent amount of time in Cube, you're not even like you're getting exactly your mana's worth. And I understand that's 2 cards for one, but it takes so much setup and deck building hoops to make sure that your Collected Company even hits at all, that it's just not worth it, because there's so many more powerful cards that are going to be outside of the realm of something you're going to be able to hit off of Collected Company. And even beyond that, like, I don't even want to play this. I don't want to play that card outside of green anyway. Like, if I'm playing like a green X deck, I want to play Collected Company even less, because it's really just a smattering of nonsense cards. There's no like consistency in this cube, because it's only Pioneer. Like, you're not able to just, unlike the Proliferate cube where you're like, I'm able to take all of the cards of Magic and make sure that this is like this big cohesive salad together. This is literally just the ingredients and you can pick a couple of ingredients out of the 10 and hope that the deck works together. And Collected Company again, and that is it's just random nonsense.
I mean, you walk that back even further.
And sometimes you miss.
Like what makes a successful aggro deck in Cube, at least in these good stuff cubes? When I talk about mono white being a very viable and competitive option in Vintage Cube, a big part of the idea is all of your stuff comes back. You take the best card for you, you're open so that you would never have to pass a strip mine, for example, or a mox, and you'll always get your 2/1 back. You'll always get some kind of removal to round your deck out. You'll always get all the pieces you need. And even though your cards aren't as powerful as the other cards, you will always be able to execute your game plan. So any other deck which will have a higher capacity to stumble than yours will stumble to you sometimes. You'll be able to defeat decks that are better than yours at a more reasonable clip than with a deck that's less consistent at performing its A plan. When you take a look at this cube, it's the same sort of thing where the cheap creatures, they don't rank in terms of best cards in the cube. And so what's the big draw? What's the draw to getting 2 of them? Why don't I just play one card that does rank?
Yeah. Now there is a card that I think is the worst card in the cube. Do you have a card that you think is the worst card in the cube? Because it's not Collected Company. There's a card I'd play less than Collected Company.
So I actually the prepared rants that I have are about 2 cards that I think are obnoxiously at least bad play patterns. One is certainly too powerful. I've spent less time thinking about the worst card in the cube, so I will defer to you on what you're about to go off about.
Okay, I don't have a lot to say about it. I just think this card is dog shit, and I don't know how Ash Cloud Phoenix even made the cube. What is this doing in here?
The amount worse than it is than Rekindling Phoenix is kind of
hilariously.
Yeah. It's kind of overwhelming how much worse it is than Rekindling Phoenix. Which, to be fair, Rekindling Phoenix makes a lot of decks, but
yeah, sure. What deck do you want? You're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna play this 4/1 Phoenix without haste, and when it dies, just wait until I get to 6 mana. So it can be a 4/1 Phoenix again. Otherwise, it's just a 2/2.
You get the 2/2 right away. That's on the house.
Yeah. Well, you put it in your Collected Company deck because that's what you're going to be getting in both cases. So, okay. All right. Ryan, you can take the floor.
Yeah, the 2 cards that I want to talk about. We'll see if you have experience with this one, but I hate the presence of Settle the Wreckage in Cube.
Oh, man.
I think it is so miserable to play both with and against. And I think it mostly just punishes players for making bad attacks, which they already will get punished for over a long enough sequence of games.
I am so torn on Settle the Wreckage because I actually love the existence of this card because the moments that it makes, and maybe it's because I don't know, but when I get blown up by this card, I'm never really that upset because if you know that it exists and you know that it's in the cube, it's something you have to have in the back of your mind. And I don't dislike the mini games of do they have Settle the Wreckage eternally as you do, because the loathing in your voice as you were saying how much you hate it was palpable.
I think that the whole thing for me is I don't find those mini games difficult to navigate. Like sometimes if you get got by it, it's because it was correct to attack and it's an unwinnable game. I just have a lot of experience playing against the card in Constructed where it's just obvious my opponent has it and I just make a good attack and they lose the game because they're not playing a card that's more broadly applicable. Just like any card that does something all the time would have made the game competitive for them. And I just know that they think they're so smart, but they're just getting got so bad and they'd be doing so much better for themselves. They just didn't play the card. And I'll board the card in against aggressive decks or whatever, but it also is just in addition to being miserable, it's not good against any of the best stuff in the cube. Like when I start drawing a million extra cards and stealing all of your permanents and taking extra turns, and you just have Settle the Wreckage in your hand, like, did you blow a first pick on that?
Man, you really hate this card.
I despise it.
I will say, and this is just across most cubes, I do not like cards that punish specifically aggro decks.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what this card does. Because unlike Wrath of God can clean up. If you play Elder Gargoyle, you're like, no problem. I'm just going to clean that up. I'll take my 1-for-1. You paid a 5-mana thing. I played a 4-mana sweeper. We're all good. But Settle is like, this is specifically out to get aggro decks, which that part I don't like. I like the minigame part more because I think that it's. I think you're, in my opinion, you're being harsh in your assessment of how easy it is to navigate in a singleton environment.
I think it's the sort of thing where if you are
constructed, I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, if you're less invested, or like this is a newer experience, there's something very novel happening here, right? Settle Wreckage is just something that other cards just don't do, at least not the exact same way. I just think as far as the cat and mouse game, the interesting to navigate, fun to navigate things, I can just immediately say there's a card I would rather see in this cube that does all of that stuff and also adds a little bit else extra. When we talked about Kaldheim cube cards, I was pretty big on Glorious Protector. And part of what I liked about it was that it also just plays well with Foretell cards. Mm-hmm. And this cube just has Doomscar, just has a number of blue Foretell cards. And Glorious Protector would also make combat complex in an interesting way, capture all the right notes when it comes to Settle the Wreckage without like the feel bads of either just losing because you had no line, but to attack with creatures that deal damage because that's what your deck does, or drawing that card and it's horrible because it doesn't line up at all. Sure.
I get it. I just think that in a singleton environment that it's like... I feel like Settle the Wreckage has hurt you in the past, so you're always looking out for it so you don't get hurt again.
That's actually just like not even it. It's one of those things where I just feel bad for the players playing the blue-white decks that think that they have a really good red matchup, and I just like beat the crap out of them because I know that they have Settle in their hand.
You attack with 2.
Yeah, it's just like they're just like ready to do the thing. This is not the same card, but I remember in Theros Standard, when Mono Blue Devotion like just hit the scene, I was playing Mono Blue Devotion against somebody playing Azorius Control, and I just like mastered a waves for like a bunch of tokens off of Biden to Thassa and like maybe 1 or 2 creatures, and they looked like they were in charge of the game. You know, it's like the typical blue-white player hubris. And I go to my combat step, they're like, sure. And I attack them with my 10/2/1 elementals. I hold the Master Wet back, and they say, I'm going to Azorius Charm your Master of Waves. And I said, in order to target a creature with Azorius Charm, it has to be attacking or blocking.
Yep. Sure. I mean, I think what you're saying is you hate the people that think that Settle the Wreckage is good.
Yes.
Therefore, you hate Settle the Wreckage.
Correct. By association.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. All right. Well, we got to the root of the problem. Okay, what's the other card?
The other card we've talked about previously, and I drafted very highly, and this one is fun to play because it punishes your opponent for playing magic whatsoever. I think Sublime Epiphany is just way too good for a cube like this.
Yeah, Sublime Epiphany is awfully good.
And I've been really negative here. You know, it is somewhat in jest. It is somewhat in good fun. I do want to just say this cube, I did have a lot of fun playing this. I did play this cube quite a bit. Blue and green are a little too powerful. I enjoy playing the mana and stuff decks, though. So there's certainly something in there for me. The balance is a little bit off.
I don't think there's anything you can do about green.
Yeah, what are you supposed to do? You know,
like, what are you gonna do?
All the creatures just tap for mana or have huge effects. So, like, what are you gonna just replace them with Crawworm? Like, you can't really do that.
Yeah, like I mean,
and realistically, it just gets better over time, right? As you get more options, this cube is working with a limited card pool, and you'll get new tools. Every set will be more impactful, and it should naturally correct somewhat over time.
There's a couple of green cards that are absent that I feel like, from a power level perspective, could be here. So there's like, I don't know, I guess a little bit of conceit to that, but I mean, otherwise, I don't know what you're supposed to do. These are just the green cards that are in Pioneer that are playable because they're just all good. They're just all good. That's just kind of how it works.
It is also the case where when you design a cube and part of the cube's name is just a legal format that people have experience with, have thoughts about, like what does the green deck in Pioneer do? It makes mana and casts big stuff. So you're a little bit priced into that.
I'd take out Nissa Who Shakes the World because I don't think we need to be doing that. You got Nissa World Waker, like that's close enough.
Sure.
We don't need to be shaking the world. That's one step too far. Because like if you just have what now?
This card is over the line in the other direction, but one of the cards that I looked for immediately when I went to review this cube was Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, because I think that card's kind of famously not banned in Pioneer. Like a couple cards died for Nykthos' sins. But
a number of cards.
Yeah.
One of them came back. One of them did get. Isn't Oath of Nissa now no longer banned?
Yeah, the unbanned that one. Leyline of Abundance still banned.
Yeah, that's still banned. Well, so did your assessment line up with your play experience for this cube?
Yeah, pretty much in lockstep, and it's kind of at the point where it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, but like once I identify that a card is just ahead of the cube, and I only draft so many times, I was doing a draft where I was pretty firmly mono green in pack 1, opened Sublime Epiphany pack 2, got past Torrential Gearhulk. It's like, well, obviously I'm going to play blue green. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to be grabbing Falcon Wrath Gorger and trying to be the hero, because like I have a pretty good idea how that story ends. And I tried those decks a little bit, but I kind of saved it for the drafts when that was the case, because even still, if I'm pretty confident in the mana and stuff decks, I only get to do so many drafts. So like when they're obviously open, I do also want to push the extreme end of these decks. And it would be really something to end up with a deck that has all the cards that I think are the best, and then to go on and lose. So you're still collecting data in both directions, even if you are forcing a little bit.
Definitely, yeah. Because we can armchair theorist all we want, but until you are actually like in the environment, that's how you confirm. And a lot of times when you're looking at a cube, especially for those of us that have looked at cube lists frequently, a lot of times it's going to confirm your initial assessment, but you still have to have that, because without it, you just don't have that confirmation. You're just guessing.
Exactly. And just in terms, just a quick note on a card that I kind of expected to see in this cube based off of a couple things, and it pretty minorly impacts the experience, but it's a card I've seen in some cubes and it's just been bad. And I think that it could realistically make the cut and do some pretty cool things in this cube. But as soon as I saw Agent of Treachery on the card list, I immediately checked the Boros section for Winota Joiner of Forces.
Yeah, no Winota.
And I think that could be a really nice splashy card to make creature heavy decks have some effects that can keep up with just the value oriented decks.
I think Agent of Treachery is pretty awesome on its own, even without Winota.
I definitely picked that one highly, and this cube was the first time that I got to activate the draw 3 cards ability with that card, which I forgot it even did.
So I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before, but that is, to me, that's just reminder text.
Yeah, if it was not on Magic Online, I probably would have forgotten about it.
Oh, no, that's not what I mean. No, that's not what I mean. It's reminder text for your opponent that when that trigger goes on a stack, you should have conceded the game already.
Sure.
There's no need to continue to play if that trigger is going on the stack and going to resolve.
Yeah, it was very much garbage time.
Like, who has had 3 of their things stolen with Agent of Treachery and then gone on to win the game? Has that ever happened? I'm being serious,
Yeah,
Brian. You talk about like conceding early all the time. There's no way that you're like, all right, well, they got 3 of them and they've cast Ancestral Recall, but I'll be able to claw my way out of this one.
But Justin, what if I made an incredibly egregious attack and to settle the wreckage?
You've drawn 3 cards. Then it still doesn't matter.
I might not even have basics left to find.
What would you draw all your basics so they're just getting them for free?
Yeah.
Think of that's an interesting deck you've constructed there. Okay. We've actually talked about this cube for like 40 minutes, so we probably should move on.
Fair enough.
Okay. All right. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, the Proliferate cube. Have some extra cards laying around that you want to get rid of? Go to starcitygames.com/sell. It has never been easier to turn your cards into cash, or if you're looking to outfit your cube or commander deck with some new favorites, get a 30% trade-in bonus when you choose store credit. No matter what your collection looks like, we have a method for you. Want to see exactly what every card you have is worth? Check out our buy list. Don't have time for that? Stick it all in a box. Send it to us, and we'll make you an offer with our ship and sell program. Or if you want a more personal touch, make your way to the Star City Game Center in Roanoke, Virginia to sit down with a buyer just like the old days. With the fastest turnaround time in the industry, get an offer in under 4 days when you go to starcitygames.com/sell. Selling has never been easier. All right, so moving on to a cube that is now in its 2nd run on Magic Online, the Proliferate cube.
Yeah, as designed by Wizards of the Coast's own Emma Handy, previously a writer for StarCityGames.com. Like you said, it's the 2nd run, and this cube is really about presence on the battlefield. We're talking about +1/+1 counters being basically the most central theme here, and Proliferate, the mechanic where you add more counters and stuff with counters, and there's some other space there. Obviously, Planeswalkers show up with loyalty counters. You have some pretty cool charge counter stuff. And it's a cube, like you said, that ends up with a pretty limited card pool in the sense that you are primarily looking for stuff that is good to proliferate. But even on that front, there was some kind of interesting updates here, presumably in terms of just balancing the colors, where a pretty heavy blink theme was added in the cube, which goes into counters a little bit. It's also kind of cool in the sense that a lot of this stuff proliferates. The creatures get very large, and the bounce effects that go into the blink deck actually are pretty impactful, or stuff like Flicker Wisp in the sense that they reset the creatures that get out of hand.
Yeah, you take those counters off. Yeah, I think that actually seems like a pretty central theme is managing your opponent's ability to create creatures that are going to abyss you every turn, because it seems like that's like a pretty, like you said, having battlefield presence is a central theme, but that I imagine is like this, like the specific scenario that happens in combat very often is I want to avoid having a bad block. So being able to reset those counters in the mid game is like critical to that.
Yeah, a ton of what's happening in the cube is just jockeying for position, trying to find yourself in the position where you have the large creature that can attack and force the opponent to get up to something. And there's actually just quite a lot of pinpoint removal, a lot of attrition elements in the cube. You see some of the most powerful removal spells of all time, Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, and that's so that the play experience can be a little bit more dynamic, so that you don't just lose if your opponent builds the larger engine faster. And I actually think that that's a very positive element to the design, not going too all in on the theme.
I think it's just a really neat thing is that this is a cube that I feel Path is cleanly better than Swords. Just because like oftentimes you are having to remove a threat, and the life gain, because the cards, the creatures are going to be bigger on average than in most other cubes, and the combat damage is how you're winning the vast majority of the time, and being able to get those spots in, like if you're casting Swords, you actually have to, I feel like you have to work a little harder to undo the advantage. Well, I don't want to say advantage, the benefit you are giving your opponent in the form of life rather than a card. is critical. But again, it's still swords, so you can't really cast Path to Exile on like turn 1 or 2, and sometimes turn 3. So even still, I like it. I like maybe they're close. Maybe I should say they're closer in power level in this
green
cube.
Can punish you a lot for Path to Exile, and part of that is there's just a ton of X mana Hydras. But the comparison is closer than it usually is.
Yeah. So something that, speaking of green, we were talking about the last cube where we felt like green was quite a powerful color. Well, let me tell you about a color that likes its +1/+1 counters and also likes having big creatures.
Yeah, no kidding. And it's powerful in a very different way than it is in most cubes. And there are a couple like all-timer mana acceleration cards here. You see Jiraga Tree Speaker sneaking in because it uses level up counters. Very, very clever.
Yeah.
And it is still very good to open up on turn 1 Jiraga Tree Speaker, but most of green strength is actually just casting cards like Colonian Hydra, 3 green for a 0/0 that answers with 4 +1/+1 counters, and it just doubles the number of the +1/+1 counters on each creature you control when it attacks, and just stuff that demands answers immediately. And 5 is just not that much mana for that sort of effect.
Yeah. Colonial Hydra is a that card's a beating. I've had that card in like probably many years ago at this point. I've had that just card in my regular cube, just as a giant monster. It continues to get bigger and bigger.
Also makes me really happy to see Cytoplast Rootkin having a home here. It's just like a card that I was so stoked about at the Dissension pre-release and just went on to not do much of anything. So, and any card like that where I have a nostalgic attachment and also it hasn't done anything, seeing that card get some time to shine makes me very happy.
Yeah. Oh, well, this cube is full of those cards. It's full of those cards. I mean, honestly, there are, as obviously I spend a bit of time playing Commander. There's a lot of cards in here that I don't want to say are Commander staples necessarily, but show up in that format way more frequently. Or like lapsed cube cards, something like a Taurian Mauler. Spent a lot of good time bashing with that in cubes a decade ago. So happy to see Taurian Mauler here and being good. Same with something like Forgotten Ancient. Those cards are just great. They just good old solid Magic cards. And you got something like Wall of Roots, which can just make mana indefinitely because you can keep adding +1/+1 counters to it. That's pretty great.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I really like that this cube, there's a lot of 1-for-1 removal. There's a couple sweepers, but broadly, the incentive is to be proactive. And I really like the way that influences drafting, because you remove yourself from what is a very common experience in cube, and it's just taking the best return on your mana. And instead, there's a much higher incentive on having creatures that fit on a mana curve that allows you to manage your sequencing very effectively, and finding cards that synergize very well so that you can take the best advantage of all these cards.
Yeah, I feel like it's very important in this cube, but it's also very easy to make sure that you're utilizing your mana to its full extent every turn. Because there's so many things that, like, you have activated abilities that put counters on things. You have Kicker. You have, I'm just going actually down literally the list. So we have in green, we have Level Up, we have Morph, we have a activated ability for 6. We have Kicker, Multi-Kicker, Morph again. What is this? Adapt. And it's just everything, every other card, and this is that's just in green, but really every other card in like almost every color. Some of them have a little bit less, but being able to utilize all of your mana to gain the biggest advantage is like probably the most critical part of being able to be successful here.
Yeah, definitely. And there is some pressure to get some of the best curve toppers. When I've written about this cube, I have been very adamant about the fact that Yawgmoth Thran Physician is just like the biggest haymaker in the cube. If you're just on the battlefield at all when that one shows up, just off of the sacrificing creatures to shrink things and draw cards mode, you'll take over that way. But then Yawgmoth can also let you proliferate. So you probably have some stuff that's very good with Yawgmoth, even though Yawgmoth does not ask for much help.
Yeah, I was say that card's pretty powerful in a non-proliferate cube, just in general. Like it does a number of things as long as you have creatures hanging around. So in a cube that specifically cares about it, is it the? There's a couple other cards that could be. It looks like it's probably the cheapest way to proliferate repeatedly on demand.
Yes. Yeah, the other on-demand ways to do it are like Contagion Clasp and Contagion Engine, which are certainly weaker cards on their face, and they're still once a turn. They take a good amount of mana. The comparable Proliferate Engine, I would probably be Atraxa Praetor's Voice, though green, white, blue, black, it's pretty difficult to cast.
Yeah, it's good if you have it, but you're not like that. I'm sure that card goes unplayed sometimes.
Yeah, you get rocked when it shows up. It's like pretty hard to pick up on it in pack 3.
Yeah. You're like, oh, I happen to be 3 of these colors. I happen to be Bant already. I'll just add black now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of cards that are sort of more traditional effects that I go out of my way not to pass in this cube. For example, Corrupted Conscious, just a 5 mana control magic that gives the creature infect. Like, not only is control magic just a very big swing in a format like this, but the infect tends to shorten your clock, even though you don't have any other poison stuff going on in your deck.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's just a number of there's a number of ways you can sneak in, not a number, but there's a couple of ways you can sneak in poison if it's not your main plan, which I think is nice, because it's like the poison and infect cards are mostly bad, but having something like a Corrupted Conscious, a Triumph of the Hordes, like I think those are neat to kind of just like get somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, getting a little bit of it, because poison does play with the theme, while also being careful not to just slot a bunch of infect creatures in a cube that's still mostly creatures dealing regular damage. That was a big thing about the Scars of Mirrodin draft environment, and where you can draw some pretty big notes from history. That format had a lot of poison stuff. When you got into the full block, there was poison in all 5 colors. And the biggest disaster was when you had half creatures that did regular damage, half creatures that dealt poison, and your opponent would like end the game with 9 poison and 2 life or something. And if your balance was just a little more in one direction, you maybe would have been able to close it. And so this cube doesn't set you up to fail in that way, while still allowing you to win in that way.
Yeah, we were talking about tricking drafters last week. Like if you were to have Blighted Agent in this cube, one, no one wants to play with that card. Like, doesn't mean no one wants to play with a card, but no one wants to be like in a game with that card. And 2, that's like a card that's is powerful theoretically, and would probably be powerful in this cube, but does trick someone into thinking, oh, I can try to draft poison in some sort of archetype, and you can't. There are some poison having cards like we were talking about, but there's not, like, poison and infect is not an archetype.
Yeah, whether your assumption is either I think I can close the game just having this poison card in my deck, which is probably just you being a little inexperienced when it comes to the tactics and strategy of the game, or B, maybe you don't realize that it's just actually mathematically impossible to have great poison support in a 600 card cube.
I mean, I don't think it's easy to have great poison support in a 360 card cube.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, it would be even more difficult. The thing that I love about this cube is it's just like, I know when Emma was going through and making this, that it was like a lot of this was precipitated on she's saying, I just love some of these cards, and I want to make sure that they have a home and can make it into a cube that makes sense for them. And just like going through this list, it makes me just happy to look at some of these. Like, for example, it's been many years since Bogart Ram Gang was like a cube staple, but it was, for those of you that are listening now, there was certainly a time, 8, 9, 10 years ago, where Bogart Ram Gang was definitely a cube staple, and it's nowhere to be seen. But yet here, found new life because it has Wither, remove those counters, and just cards like that. I don't know. It's just looking at some of this stuff. It makes me happy to see some of the cards that make an appearance in this cube, knowing that they're able to live maybe not their best life, but find some of their former glory.
Right. And that does, because everything is so different, and because the attachment to a number of these cards can be nostalgic, it can be a little bit more difficult for a less experienced player or player that's newer to the game to pick up this cube, which is a little bit of downside baked in. All the same, very cool to do something different. All the onboard tricks are also pretty punishing to newer players.
Yeah.
Where if you have all the cards memorized, you're like, okay, well, if I make this attack, they have these 2 activated abilities just on the table. They got 3 cards in hand. They could be this trick, this removal spell, or whatever. And you can actually get into really interesting, complex games. Mm-hmm. Or you can be the player getting punished for not knowing that damage stacks. Which
yeah. Well, that's kind of tough, and that is a good point. That this probably is just one of the toughest cubes to navigate, especially if you're going in and you're like, proliferate cube, and you focus more on the cube part than the proliferate part, and you're like, it's just a cube, I'll just draft a cube, and you're like, I'll just take cards that I see that I like that are good, and I'm like, oh yeah, and there's plenty of those cards that exist that just if you don't see them contextually within the cube, just look like normal cube cards. You're like, oh, Blade Splicer. Yeah, cool. I'll just draft Blade Splicer. Oh, what do we have coming up next? Mana War. Okay, cool. I'll draft Mana War. Then what after that? Yeah. I'm not going to think about what this High Sentinels of Arashin might mean for this cube, but I will just take this Archangel of Thune because that's a good card. So I feel like if you're not aware of like the larger synergy, that it could be quite detrimental to your experience once you get into a game, thinking you have a competent deck that is based on good cards in a cube.
That deck you described did sound kind of good to me. I will say the point stands. If you go ahead and draft those cards and then pass Soul Herder, I think you're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah, So, I think that's realistic that you could pick those 3 cards first in a cube, right? But that doesn't mean that like as you get, but you're not going to continue to get cards of that power level as the packs continue,
right?
Most likely. So yeah, of course it sounds. I would be happy to start a deck with Blade Splicer into Mana War into Archangel of Thune. Yeah, I'll do that all day. That sounds great. But I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so what has been the thing in your drafting of this cube that has garnered the most success?
The white beatdown decks are actually just actively good in this cube. A friend of mine was the early trophy leader, did not end up closing the season, but the first couple days was kind of all over the cube. And he would try to draft white aggressive decks, but more than that, I would like be doing something, hanging out in Discord, and periodically I would just hear him cursing the fact that another opponent had a turn 2 Luminarch Aspirant.
Well, that card's just awesome in general, but
yes. Yeah. Just the colors that have the stuff that snowballs in value more on its own over time with some kind of like 0 mana effect. Those are a huge deal. And you get into the late game, you see some stuff where green really starts to shine. For example, a card that is pretty close to unpassable in this cube is Deep Forest Hermit. 3 green, homage to a deranged hermit. Vanishing 3, I'm not going to be vanishing. Eventually it dies. 3 turns later it dies. 1/1 gives your squirrels +1/+1, makes 4 1/1 squirrel tokens. So just 5 mana, 9 power. That card just on its face, that's just so much return on your mana. And then this iteration of the cube also has a pretty deep blink theme. If you happen to pull that off and you had Soul Herder and blinked it right away, the game may as well be over. The most powerful thing that I did with Deep Forest Hermit in this run, a new card from Commander Legends, which I got to play with and see played for the first time, is Sweet Gum Recluse.
Yep.
It's a 4 green 0/3 spider with Flash, Cascade, and Reach. I actually didn't fully understand what this card does. So when it enters the battlefield, you put 3+1/+1 counters on each of any number of target creatures that enter the battlefield this turn. I thought you had to choose one. And then my opponent like flashed it into some combat, made itself into a 3/6, pumped some other creature. I was like, oh, that's like really bad for me. And then later on in the cube season, I got to Sweet Gum Recluse, cascading into Deep Forest Hermit, ending the game immediately.
Yeah, it's super messed up. You go from 9 power to 27 power. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I did okay.
Yeah, I imagine so.
And this cube is just really good both for rewarding those early incremental value plays, positioning on the battlefield, while also having some pretty cool swingy stuff later in the game and allowing both of those things to shine in different decks and different matchups.
Yeah, I like it. I just like having like little other cards like, Contentious Plan. That's like, okay, well, this is definitely a card I'm looking to pick up like at the end of a pack. Just to make sure. Yeah, because you're just getting, when you can always get some sort of value in addition to the card draw. And honestly, going through, it actually seems like this Blink theme is probably pretty powerful.
I did a draft where I had like a kind of unexciting pack, and I pack 1, pick 1 Hollowed Fountain and just like stayed the course. And then I ended up getting Soul Herder, pack 3, pick 8, last possible moment, and just really smooth sailing that draft.
Yeah, anytime, I always feel like anytime that a cube has Ghostly Flicker, they're committed to the Blink theme, because that card, when you're committed, is like kind of messed up.
Definitely.
Just getting 2 things at once. Well, what would you expect if this cube were to come back? I know a number of cards were taken out and swapped. Do you think that there is an archetype that you would want to be juiced more? Because it looks like for this last time that the Blink archetype was given some love. Mm-hmm. So what would you want to see, like, for an archetype getting that type of help for this cube going forward?
I've had the least success with the red decks in the cube. The removal spells are nice. Yeah. There's a couple cards at the top of the curve that are pretty powerful. In general, I feel like red is left with the most like booster draft level commons. You could just use some upgrades on that front. Maybe get in a little bit more of like all-time powerful sacrifice cards if we're going to do all-time powerful Blink cards, or just ramp that deck up a little. And I could just be oblivious and maybe other people are really crushing it with the red deck, but my experience has been that I haven't really won with red and haven't really lost to red.
Well, it does make sense when you think about it, because red doesn't like big creatures and big creatures with big toughness, just in general, right?
Yeah.
So if you're able to stifle early aggression just by having better trades, where like previously with red, you have to make some concessions to cast cards in an order to like make sure that you can block and prevent them from getting too much of a tempo advantage where you're kind of playing from behind to keep your life total up. But red is going to have a harder time doing that in this particular cube, because every color is able to do that. I mean, like, there's a lot of small creatures. I mean, we were just talking about like Luminarch Aspirant, I feel like is a particularly excellent creature, but there's a lot of creatures that are just getting some sort of tangential value at the early part of the curve compared to a lot of other cubes, and that makes it really hard for red to take advantage of the fact that they are more aggressive. So, and on top of that, it's tough for although I will say that there are burn spells that go a little bit that tilt bigger than they normally would to take advantage of the fact, well, not take advantage, but to make up for the fact that the creatures are bigger. So you have a Galvanic Blast, Shrapnel Blast, Brimstone Volley, just cards that can make sure that they can get large creatures pushed down a little bit, fight with fire, stuff like that. So there is more of that than there normally would be.
Hmm. Even still, though, when you have inefficient removal spells, maybe slightly worse threats, it's really hard to come back on the back foot with a red deck. And I'd like to see just a little bit more beef there.
Yeah. That's fair. That makes total sense. Okay, Ron, any other thoughts on the Proliferate cube?
I mean, honestly, my biggest critique of the cube is I don't really understand why it has to be a 600 card cube. I do think it suffers a little bit from size. If we say 540 is the minimum for Magic Online, I think you can trim a lot of cards that underperform. A number of these slots in the mana curve, or a lot of the colors, there's just a ton of 2 and 3 mana creatures that are just, well beyond the amount that you would put in your deck. And just trimming some of that stuff, I think that this cube would benefit from slimming down a little bit.
All right, so I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So you are suggesting that the best possible size for this cube is 540 cards.
I'm saying that I would contend that 540 cards is a more ideal size than 600, but I've never been able to stop you from putting words in my mouth before.
Well, Ryan, we have everything recorded here, so we can let the listeners decide. Okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think that, I certainly agree with that. The tighter the experience, as low as you're able to go, I think for a cube that is really trying to play to a certain theme, seems like it would make sense to me. Hmm. And maybe you need 600 cards because you need to keep Joyra's toolbox in the cube. But I kind of just feel like you probably don't.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
You don't need that Joyra's toolbox.
Wouldn't hang my hat on that one.
Yeah. Look, Campus Guide is great, but I bet you don't need it. That you just don't. Anyway. Okay. Any other thoughts on the Proliferate cube?
I'm pro Proliferate cube. Anyway.
Well, that sounds like it's time for an ad break then. So we're gonna take our last one and be back in just a moment.
Taking a quick break from the podcast to talk to you very quickly about Star City Games Premium and why you should become a Star City Games Premium member. First, me, Cedric Phillips. I'm the online content coordinator for Star City Games. So if you like me and you want to see me keep my job, you should sign up. And if you don't like me, we're not going to talk about that. Okay, let's talk about what you actually get for signing up and paying the $7.99 per month to become a premium member, which is less than the cost of a couple of booster packs, by the way. It's actually, I think, if memory serves, like less than a collector booster, and they got these set boosters and all these different types of boosters now. So look, let's just say for less than a collector booster a month, you receive the following benefits. Are you ready? 5% discount on all Magic the Gathering sealed products, 10% discount on all Magic the Gathering singles, 15% discount on all supplies, which include card sleeves, deck boxes, binders, all that stuff for when real life play gears back up again. You also get some free entry to some SCG Tour Online events if you're digging the SCG Tour Online and want to play in some of those tournaments like our satellites and stuff like that. A couple of freebies out there. But let's not forget the big one, the exclusive access to Star City Games website content from many of Magic the Gathering's top players and fan favorite personalities like myself, like Patrick Sullivan, like Sheldon Menery, like Paulo Vitor Damaderosa, who is way too good at Magic the Gathering, Jerry Thompson, Autumn Burchett, Brian Gottlieb, Todd Anderson, Ari Lax. I'm going to forget somebody here and they're not going to like me for it. Brad Nelson, who's back writing for Star City on a weekly basis. Michael Majors, Dominic Harvey, The list goes on and on and on. That's how I saved myself there for people that I may have forgotten. Ryan Sachs, I didn't forget you. I swear, Ross Merriam, I didn't forget you either. Shaheen, hello. Stop playing bad control decks. Anyway, $7.99 a month. Less than the cost of a collector booster pack. Get awesome content. Discounts 5, 10, 15% across the board. Get access to some SCG Tour online events for free as well. Head over to starcitygames.com/join premium for more information. With that, back to the pod.
Ryan, the last cube in our retrospective today is what I believe is the oldest cube to appear on Magic Online. Maybe not in its exact form, but in spirit, and that is the Legacy Cube.
Yeah, this is kind of where it started. I think 2014, we went from the Magic Online Cube to the Legacy Cube branding, which very similar to what they then called the Holiday Cube, we now call the Vintage Cube, except no power, none of a couple of the other all-time power level outliers either.
For the most part, yeah.
I said none of a couple. There are some power level outliers remaining, to be sure.
There are. Unlike the Pioneer Cube, where the Pioneer Cube is looking to the Pioneer ban list to determine whether a card's power level dictates of whether it should be in this cube or not based on that ban list. The Legacy Cube simply doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, when they originally implemented it, I believe that they didn't touch anything that was restricted in Vintage and then banned in Legacy, I think. So like you lose all of the black tutors, and you lose some stuff like Strip Mine. And in general, this cube abides by the Legacy ban list, but for some reason, we still have to play with and against Oko, Thief of Crowns.
There it is. Okay. Why do you think, if you could envision a reason that you think that someone who made the decision to keep Oko in this cube could give you, what do you think that would be?
Oopsie.
We forgot it was in there.
I'd be really surprised if this was a deliberate choice.
Well, to be fair, there have been mistakes out of Renton regarding how Oko functions before.
Something we didn't talk about when we went over the Mengu cube on the podcast. The original cube list that they published just had 2 Wall of Omens, which was hilarious to me. But stuff gets missed sometimes, and I just think that that's what's going on with Oko here.
Okay, so you think they just missed it? That's not willful. You know what? We really need to give this card another chance.
The people
to see
haven't had
what
enough.
it's made of. Yeah, based on our data last time, this was not the most winning card. Therefore, we do not feel the need to remove it. You don't think it's any of those reasons? You think it's a simple whoopsie doopsie?
They actually have kind of like an Aplazo meter that they move the needle on in-house in Renton, where the more we complain about anything Magic adjacent on Twitter, the more cubes they put Oko in.
Oh.
It's our punishment.
Okay. Well, we will just make sure that this part does not go to the in case you missed it on Twitter.
And Oko's not the only really difficult to pass card in the cube. All the same, pretty overplaying with and against Oko. And something I mentioned when we were talking about the Pioneer Cube is I did have to double check if Oko was actually banned in Legacy when I saw it on the card list. I was like, I'm pretty sure. And I kind of hope, but maybe they didn't.
No,
also,
it is. They did correct that.
You got to maintain that Gilded Goose combo.
Yeah. I'm wondering how many other cards with food. Let's see. Can I find text? Food. Nope, just Oko and Goose. Got it.
Yep.
Just wanted to check there, but that is the only one. Okay. Well, that's a combo. And you don't want to take that away from Gilded Goose. Maybe it's really about Gilded Goose.
Yeah, they have to keep the Gilded Goose in the ranks of the other much better 1-mana accelerants in Cube.
Yeah, you're thinking about, Brian, you might be thinking about this from an opposite perspective. You might be thinking that Gilded Goose is supplying Oko with food tokens to turn into Elks. But perhaps it's that Oko is supplying Gilded Goose with food to turn into 1 mana.
That's the secret to success in Legacy Cube.
Yeah, well, there has to be a reason. So I don't want to take anything off of the table.
Yeah, I'm anti-Oko and anti-Gilded Goose for the completely opposite reason. So yeah, maybe I just need to play them together more. That's a fair point.
Yeah. So now the thing for this cube, while it is different than the vintage cube, it is only different in the sense that it simply doesn't have power and power adjacent cards in this cube, but otherwise a lot of the same cards are appearing here as they do in the vintage cube.
The archetypes overlap very heavily in terms of macro archetypes. Almost nothing is different. You don't get the Tinker. That's like kind of a power adjacent card. Storm is not supported in Legacy Cube, and to be fair, it's not generally advised in Vintage Cube anyway.
I was going to say, I was like, well, I don't think it's supported in the Vintage Cube either, but it is present.
But you have the red beatdown, and then a lot of support for red mid-range too, which we can go deeper on that or not. You have the white beatdown deck, the white control stuff that's usually for Azorius control, blue and whatever else you want, because the blue cards are still the best cards. Black Reanimator plus black other deck, and green ramp.
Black other deck. Is the other deck you're talking about the I thought I was going to be able to draft aggro, and then I realized I simply had all of the cards and there's not enough to make an entire deck?
Yeah, I accidentally drafted black again.
Yeah.
I picked Ashiok Nightmare Weaver, and in splashing it, I also am able to play Grave Titan and 1 or 2 interactive spells.
Great. Yeah, black is my favorite color in Magic, and it has historically given me the most trouble in Cube for the better part of a decade. The thing is, like, I get it, because I think for this Legacy Cube, their goal, has to be one of their goals, is to say these are the best cards of these color. You can have access to all of them, and you can try to figure out how to make them work together the best. Which is true. Like, if you look at these cards individually, like, these are some of the most heralded black cards, but also, I don't know, maybe not. It's not like, there's a lot of cards here from the last couple of years in black. And even though we were talking about cards in the last 2 years being quite powerful, when you're comparing them to the historical power level of cards in Legacy, they still do not measure up. So as much as I think that Nighthawk Scavenger is a technical upgrade over Vampire Nighthawk, neither of them are needle movers for me in the year 2021.
I think it's the sort of thing, I believe we talked about this previously in the podcast, and if you followed the history of Cube, you'll be aware, but now and again, they do just radically overhaul black in the Legacy Cube, or when it was called the Magic Online Cube, just generically. They've tried vampires, tried pushing devotion, just moving it in directions, and then just realizing, oh, well, these synergies are really restricted to trying to draft mono black, and it's still a color that generally underperforms if your deck is more black than some other color. But I think that we've seen enough sacrifice supports in recent years that it might be time to try to really push black and also red in the direction of just supporting the sacrifice deck. Let's get Goblin Bombardment back in the spread. Let's put in a little bit more stuff that pushes that deck. And I do think that the bones of the sacrifice deck that we saw in the Nega Cube, coupled with some of the all-time powerful creatures on curve in the current Legacy Cube, could lead to a very fun and competitive deck in this environment.
Yeah, I actually 100% agree. As I was going through this list, that's what I was thinking, because I included a sacrifice deck in the SCG Con Cube for the last whatever year it was, 2019, in a different world, which was a powered cube that the power level, even though it had power in it, more resembled the power level of the Legacy Cube here, and that deck was quite good, and it was well supported, and it gave black and red a different identity, which is, I think, is also important for red, because red's identity is just want to go fast, and it doesn't care as much about having synergy or interesting drafting or deck building decisions where you're just trying to spend as much of your mana to deal as much damage as you can every single turn.
And I do see it as a solution that gets two birds with one stone as well, because they've curbed red significantly. Some of the all-time best red cards have been removed. You cannot play Sulfuric Vortex in this cube. You cannot play Fire Blast. Those cards are just not in this cube. You still get to play Mystic Confluence. You still get to play Oko, but red is not allowed to be the best color, and giving it those sacrifice synergies would at least make it more competitive.
Yeah, I agree. And it's also like those cards are just I feel, and this is me, but sacrificing creatures is something that I love to do in just any Magic format. So I feel like that is a more fun angle than dumpy ass black creatures, which is what we have opted for in this cube, and below average red creatures, because they have struggle keeping up with the power scale, but then you've also neutered their reach, which I guess I get that part kind of, but like you're just deciding, you're like, someone just sat down, they're like, you know what? I don't want red to ever be the best color in this cube. So let's just take out these. And that has to have been what happened, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not just like, let's try to hurt red. It's like, we just want to make sure red's not the best color. Like, you could still playable, but it's not going to be the best thing.
And there's just so much of the stuff that is powerfully adversarial to red is very much maintained, I've certainly had the experience where I draft just an incredible red deck and my opponent reanimates Iona on turn 2 and the game is over. And you can still reanimate Iona on turn 2. You just can't have a deck that you're okay that it happened to you with. It's like, well, I wasn't going to beat anything worse than that, and I'm certainly not beating that. So this sucks a lot. I don't know why I put mountains in my deck. I'm an idiot.
Okay, so as an aside, we were talking about the sacrifice deck. Someone has already decided that without the sacrifice deck, they still believe that Greater Gargadon is of an appropriate power level. I imagine that that Greg Hatch might have had a hand in this, wherever he is lurking now. He's a big fan of Greater Gargadon, Cuber from many years ago. I don't think this card has been good enough in a very long time.
It's really funny because there's some quote unquote combos with Greater Gargadon, and you scroll down, there's no wildfire. So you can't do the Greater Gargadon wildfire thing. There is upheaval, but like upheaval doesn't need Greater Gargadon. You can leave that one on the bench.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The combo is Armageddon and Ravager's War. I get it.
I had upheaval and other cards in my deck. Thank you for playing.
How did you end up with Greater Gargadon in your deck?
Yeah, you would have
I'm
to
serious.
draft
like,
it.
if you're like, I'm drafting upheaval, I mean,
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I mean, some people will say, oh, this deck's very cool. And I'm like, yeah, it is very cool. It's just not good at all, and strategically putting yourself at a disadvantage for no reason.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that card's here. But you know what? That card could be improved if someone is dedicated to making sure that Greater Gargadon's in this 600 card Legacy Cube. Put the sacrifice theme in there. Then it actually has legs. Then it's a card that you actually are like, you know what I would like in this deck? I'd like a Greater Gargadon.
Another thing that's nice about the sacrifice deck is it does a good job of kind of making it unclear who is currently winning the game. When you have like mono red beatdown against control, It's like, okay, well, what's their life total when the sweeper comes down? Did the red player stick Sulfuric Vortex? It's generally pretty clear who the onus is on to turn things around. With the sacrifice deck, it's like, all right, well, you can answer that stuff, but they have a sacrifice outlet, so you can't exile the blood gas. That Goblin Bombardment is going to keep poking out damage that way. There's this way and this way that they can reset the battlefield if they're swept. There's just like a lot of complex and interesting, cool stuff happening, and the gameplay is just much deeper.
They are, and the frustrating thing is they have like little tidbits here. So it's like they started to go in and they're like, well, cube needs to be turned in, so let's go ahead and turn it in. I'll just stop. Like Outpost Siege is here. Outpost Siege is already not a powerful card. Like it's fine. It's fine, but the best that you're able to do is like have a bad Phyrexian Arena or a bad Goblin Bombardment.
Mm-hmm.
You know how you like to talk about two good deals? I feel like Phyrexian or Outpost Siege is like two bad deals that are just okay enough to make it playable sometimes. But again, if you have something that actually cares about proactively sacrificing your creatures, then that card becomes a lot more interesting.
And there's just way more ways to curve out and just beat the crap out of an Outpost Siege than there used to be. The idea of Outpost Siege,
million.
When it's well positioned, is okay. Here's Outpost Siege. Your life total's under some pressure. I'm going to keep the cards coming. I'll be able to poke through eventually. And your opponent's just like, Elder Gargaroth, Coggo the Titanate, you're dead. Why you? I do not care what you reveal to your siege.
I can tell you what card art we're going to be using to promote this episode this week.
Big Elder Gargaroth episode.
Yeah, it's gonna be Elder Gargaroth. Yeah, it's gonna be that one. If that wasn't clear. As we see, takes all comers, any cube, doesn't matter, just a big, obnoxious, just old. You know, when I first looked at Elder Gargaroth, have we talked about what I had envisioned what this looked like before? Like what I thought that the art was?
Hit me.
Okay, so I thought that what I believe are I need to zoom in. Gargaroth. Okay, let me see if I can find an actual image of this. Here we go. I thought that the tusks, like the bottom tusks, like the big ones, I thought those were like big like bunny ears at first. Like that its face was kind of pointed up like towards the sky, like its head was back, and that was like a set of like ears. It's not. Its face is pointed like towards those tusks because they are tusks. There's two set of tusks, but I thought those were ears, and I thought the little mouth, which kind of looks like a canine-esque mouth, is pointed towards the sky. Do you see that?
Yeah, you thought that it was kind of a glamorous, majestic beast, and it's actually a vicious murder monster.
Yes. Well, I knew that it also liked to murder, but I thought it liked to look fabulous while it did it at the same time. But it was just kind of like throwing its head back and as it stomped around. So yeah, that's kind of where I was with Elder Gargaroth.
And obviously,
for a while,
there's a number of answers to Elder Gargaroth. There's strategies that go bigger than Gargaroth, though. If you play a game where players are just kind of out and the Gargaroth shows up, it does just win those games. And we jokingly locally refer to Elder Gargaroth as power. Like when we play a non-vintage cube, we see Gargaroth in the pack. Like, wow, I thought this cube was unpowered.
Oh, yeah. Never gets old, I'm sure.
No, that and opening up a vintage cube pack with no power and saying, I thought this was the powered cube. Those are two very good cube jokes.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of legs. Do you like swords, Ryan? Specifically things that say swords of something and something else.
Word and some other word. I think they're generally overrated, and I think Sword of Body and Mind is one of the worst regular cube experiences. They actually added that one to the Arena Cube recently, which I found baffling.
They sure did. Yep.
In general, like, in a legacy cube, whatever. They're not the most mess up thing going on, though I understand the hate.
I just think they're really uninteresting for the most part. Like power level, fine. I would never put Sword and Body and Mind in a cube. I think that's obnoxious. I legitimately don't understand why you were doing that. If you're gonna put Sword of Body and Mind, just put like Jace Memory Adept. Just who cares? Fuck, you don't care. if you don't care about people getting milled out by chunks of 10, just put them all in. What difference does it make? This is a colorless one. You need a creature.
I have fond memories of extended PTQs using Stoneforge Mystic to find Sword of Fire and Ice, so I'm a little clouded by nostalgia there. In general, the experience of playing against something with protection from some color in cube is just miserable and should be avoided.
Yeah, I agree. I've really come off of things having protection, like widely scanning protections, which colors are included in that. So I really dislike the swords. There's like not enough like cool equipments to like take their place in a lot of cubes though, which is why it's really frustrating. Like I wish I could just have the effect without the protection. That's kind of the thing. That's the thing that I want. Mm-hmm. Like I wish I could just errata all of these, like just to be the exact same card, just without the stupid protection clause on there.
I do generally. So I hate Sword of Body and Mind. I see a little bit more appeal in sort of Feast and Famine than some of the other ones, because I think letting the more lower to the ground aggressive decks have a tool against the green deck just outsizing you on the battlefield is nice. Though there are other ways to do it, and the misery floor is very miserable.
Yeah, the misery floor is you're playing Jund and you're like, well, I can't beat this, so.
Jund players are used to that, though. Half the time, that's the case.
That's true. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Yeah, that's why you're able to quickly recover. All right. Well, I've seen this one before. We'll go on to the next game.
Next game, I can't lose, so let's do it.
I do appreciate the one sword that is absent from here is the one that is present in the Proliferate cube, which is, of course, Sword of Truth and Justice, which actually makes 100% sense in that cube.
Yes. Yeah. It literally proliferates. Also makes sense not being here because blue and white is just kind of the least likely color pair to be trying to block you, and the effects on the sword are pretty weak relative to the cube.
Yeah, you're putting counters on. I don't know. I feel like I'm just tired. I'm tired of the swords. And the thing is, we're getting ready to go to Modern Horizons 2. There's going to be 2 more goddamn swords in that set, maybe 3. And I just have to hope that they are designed. I actually don't care. I'm going to not like them. I just hate protection. I think that's just what it comes down to.
Yeah, I find that very agreeable. And I think that that's just a very popular position as well. Just games where you just have no agency are not pleasant to play. Like, why don't I just go to work if I'm going to not have any say in anything?
I mean, but yeah, sure. But the swords are like incredibly popular. I bet they rank extremely highly if you were to say, what are your favorite cards in Cube to like the Magic playing populace in general? I bet a card like Sword of Fire and Ice is probably one of the most popular cards like in the entire Cube.
It is.
Like I guarantee that's the case.
Because there's the two things like, how much do you hate losing to it? But there's also the question, how much do you love winning with it? And the swords do a good job of players feeling really good winning with them.
Yeah. If you feel really good, going to a park and then like pointing out a 7-year-old and be like, I'm going to beat the shit out of you. And then going over and they're like, I can't do anything about it. And you're like, that's exactly right. You're playing blue and red. And then you start just, I'm not encouraging child violence. I'm just saying that's sometimes what it feels like when you have a sword and you're like, yeah, I'm doing a really great job because I had one creature and
I
the sword that I'm playing had protection from their deck.
Any other situation that's similar to this, I dare you.
It's the
only one. It's the only one.
It's the only one. I don't know. I just noticed there were 6 of them in this cube and I felt like it was appropriate to rant about it.
Yeah, that's reasonable. I am more on the side, with the exception of Sword of Body and Mind. I think people like draft them too much in this cube, and they're not good in Vintage Cube, so this is kind of where they need to live.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I understand. Like, people want to play with them despite the experience of playing with them. And as such, there should be a place where you are able to play with them. Right. This is the place where you should do so. At least Ancient Grudges in the cube, which is my favorite way to defeat a Sword of Body and Mind, or a Sword of Haves and Have-Nots. So, okay, otherwise, Legacy Cube. Green's awfully powerful. I feel like this is a broken record.
Green's awfully powerful, and guess what? Blue's awfully powerful.
Yeah. So maybe you should make a Mardu cube, Ryan. That way you can not have to have green and blue be the two most powerful colors.
Honestly, the 180 card Tubert model, great for supporting 3-color environments. If you're into Mardu, definitely do it. I got a couple things between me and getting to that, but I am all about that. I think somebody should build that, and I think somebody would love that. And they only need one other friend to accept it for it to be fun. Like, the other person doesn't even have to love it. You only need one person to love it and one other person to play it. So
yeah, exactly.
When this cube launched, I jumped into the queues, drafted a Sultai deck that had an Ashiok. Yeah, I played my Ashiok in my deck and justified playing a couple other black cards.
Ashiok Nightmare Weaver is miserable. That's a hell of a drug.
Miserable.
Yeah.
Horrible to have in cube.
Yeah.
I drafted it because it's very powerful, you see.
It is quite powerful. We used to call because I had Ashiok in my cube years ago, and we would call Ashiok Ashy Larry, and we would say no one beats Ashy Larry. Ashy Larry from of course from Chappelle Show. Yeah. But nobody beats Ashy Larry. You don't beat him. But it's in the cube, so it's a thing you should draft.
Yeah,
because it's quite good.
You can draft it or you can lose to it. Yeah, well, once it's there, it's kind of out of your hands. And
yeah,
I don't know. You don't always lose to Ashiok, but it's just like kind of stupid
but
how many different things it is good against. Because you either like have creatures and it steals your creature and gets like a 2-for-1 and probably sticks around to still make your life miserable, or you can play a deck that's trying to draw specific cards, be it a combo deck, be it a deck that has some planeswalkers or interactive spells you really want to draw, and like randomly the Ashiok just exiles them. It doesn't even mill you. It just that's gone forever.
Yeah, Ashiok I think is the magic card in cubes that gains its controller the most life without having the word life on the card.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Because Oko, at least life is kind of on the card. It doesn't say it, but it makes food tokens, so I think that counts.
So anyway, I destroyed a lot of lands and countered some spells and drew some cards and trophied pretty easily with my blue-green and some black broken cards deck. And then an unfortunate thing that's been happening, I'm trying to figure out, I should have tried to do a little bit more research. I've seen this bug reported a number of places, but I don't know if they know if it's just a general Magic Online thing, if it's like with this cube, because it doesn't start from the same point. It's not caused by the same cards as far as I've seen or understand it, but a lot of Legacy Cube games have just been they've just been restarting. You play to a certain point, then it just kind of like goes to the tape, replays the match. You like watch all the plays that both players made. I was playing a game where that happened. It got caught up. And then our round clock restarted. And then we both just had hands that were like, at least my hand was not the hand I started that game with. And we couldn't take a game action and had to discard the hand size every turn.
Wow, what an experience.
And this has happened to a number of my friends. There was a pretty high profile Twitter thread where Gabby Sparts and another streamer, I don't remember who Gabby was playing against. But anyway, it was streamed on both sides and just like the same thing happened.
Wow.
Some friends seem to think it's related to Jade Light Ranger, but it like doesn't happen when you
they're
cast
just looking
that
for a
card?
patsy.
They just hate Jade Light Ranger.
Yeah,
exactly.
that's clearly what it is.
I have a friend who despises Jade Light Ranger, so it's funny you say that.
Why? What is it to hate about Jade Light Ranger?
He just picks fights with shit. Like, he doesn't have a reason, and if you try to justify it or ask why he hates it, he'll just triple down.
Yeah.
But anyway, Jade Light Ranger is the problem. Is what I'm saying. But I don't know. Something's going on. I hope that they fix it or that it's already fixed.
What if they were like, the only way to fix it is we have to take out Jade Light Ranger, but when we do that, it will still mess up unless we add in a second copy of Oko Thief of Crowns.
We have determined a fix. We haven't really sorted out the source of the problem, but the only cure is more Oko.
Exactly. Would you play the cube the same amount if you knew that it would be fixed, but there were 2 Okos in the cube?
I think that the number of power level outliers in Legacy Cube are high enough that I would accept that.
What if you also never had an Oko? Like, you're guaranteed to never have one.
I never get to play with it. I can only.
You
play
never get to play
it.
with one. You don't always play against it, but you will never have it.
I will go back to cheering for the games I'm losing to restart.
Okay. I just had to figure out where we drew the line.
No, yeah, that if I don't get my turn, what's the point?
I guess it's all the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. Okay. I like some of the cards they added from Commander Legends into this cube.
Mm-hmm.
Arc of Coronation. I'm a fan of Monarch, not like abundance of the Monarch, but like having that mechanic in a higher powered cube. Just because I think in general, things that are beneficial to aggressive decks are a positive. But that is a card that I like a lot, and I actually think that it's a pretty interesting 6-drop for white.
Just that's a cool upgrade. I like Monarch in the high power level cubes, Legacy Cube, Vintage Cube.
Yeah,
there's not the most balanced cards generally, but they're part of Magic, and so I do like them in these high power environments. I'm really happy that Court of Bounty got to make its Magic Online Cube debut here. I think it's a little bit more appropriate for Vintage Cube, but as long as it's somewhere, we're getting a chance to see how that one plays out, which is very cool.
Yeah, I think we have that, the Arcan, and then Fall from Favor, which is I think that card is actually the most powerful among the 3, in my opinion.
Okay. I certainly believe Fall from Favor is very powerful. My vote is currently on the court, but
sure. I'm gonna take this because I think that the decks that are able to benefit from this are able to really do a number on aggressive decks that might benefit from having the Monarch, but it's really difficult to play against if you're able to have any sort of board presence.
Yeah, that's sort of like a control deck that just like uses that on your only creature and just has everything else rolled up is just gonna smoke you.
Yeah, it just plays keep away. I mean, really, like fall from Favor for me in this cube is like, it's like pacifism plus Phyrexian Arena for 2 and a blue.
Yeah, that's pretty apt.
Yeah, so and if you're able to like position your deck where you're just casting like one for one removal spells and just leave that creature around, it's almost impossible for a deck that this is good against to not get buried.
There's one other, in my opinion, pretty cool addition from Commander Legends. I want to pick your brain about this one though.
Okay.
Slash the ranks. 3 white sorcery. Destroy all creatures and planeswalkers except for commanders. So in cube, destroy all creatures and planeswalkers.
Yeah. So I think that there are, it looks like, what are there, about 20, 30, probably about 30 planeswalkers. Let me check in this cube. See if I can click this little analysis button on Cube Tutor, or Cube Cobra rather. Oh, can I please filter? All right, I'm not going to try to find that. Anyway,
I'm showing
I
20
think-
monocolored planeswalkers, and there's some scattered in the gold, and you have like Karn Liberated.
Yeah. So somewhere between probably close to 30 because there's 3 colorless ones. So that's 23. And if we assume there's like, I would say probably around 30. So I think that I actually quite like it in this cube because planeswalkers are generally a way that you're able to like run away from the game, and it's a lot easier to protect them and make sure that they are not destroyed in this cube comparatively, just because with a lot of the ones they have here, I feel like the power level scales with the rest of the cards. Now, that's not the case with all of them. Like, you have a couple that are like, I kind of feel like these are a little worse than on average. Like Jace Mirror Mage, like, is in this cube. Okay. Even like Chandra Acolyte of Flame. But there's still so many other ones that it's just like they're almost like impossible to like fight down if you have creatures, and there's so few removal spells that get them, like comparatively to the rest of the cube. And there's a handful in black, but we already talked about how black is like not an ideal color, and there's really not even that many. There's actually just like Hero's Downfall and Bloodchief's Thirst. Is Murderous Rider here? Murderous Rider's here too. Okay, so there's a small number, and I think that having a Wrath for 5 is a pretty good amount worse than having a Wrath for 4 with Day of Judgment and Wrath of God, and I presume Supreme Verdict's not. Okay, Supreme Verdict is in the queue. Okay, so there's 3 other Wraths for 4, and I think if you have a couple of Wraths that are more expensive that do a larger effect, I think that those are still playable in this cube, and the effect of that card is actually pretty massive. So I actually think that for this cube, it is an appropriately power level card that's probably pretty good. It's probably better than the non 4-mana Wraths. I think it's probably the next best Wrath if I had to guess.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I completely agree, and it gets around one of the common ways that you would try to beat a sweeper effect with an aggressive deck or just like a mid-range creature deck, and that's by leveraging planeswalkers. So it cleans all that up, and it costs an extra mana. That's something that balances it. I also think that a very cool part of the design that's quietly present is you can't just clean up opposing creatures and maintain your own planeswalkers. So if you're casting this, you're just equalizing the board state. In general, this will not allow you to immediately pull ahead with planeswalkers. So it offers a pretty high power effect with multiple things that balance it. And I think that just makes for a really interesting and powerful cube card altogether.
Yep, I agree. I think one of the most powerful combinations in cubes that it's present is the card Elspeth Sun's Champion and Wrath of God.
It's a good combo.
Just straight away, yeah. And this is something that allows you to kind of to break that up. But there's so many planeswalkers here that either go to a very high loyalty or can have an exceptional job of protecting themselves, and those are generally the most frustrating to fight against. And this is a card that just cleans everything up. So yeah, I'm certainly for it.
It kills Oko and all the Elks.
It sure does. Now, if they have food laying around,
no, it's no answer to food.
Yeah, and then if they play the second Oko that they've drafted because Ryan made the deal with the devil so he could continue to cube. Yeah, but that's I do like Slash the Ranks. I think it's neat. Oh, Ryan, I don't know if I have anything else to say more about this Legacy Cube. We've talked in circles about things that don't have to do with this Legacy Cube a lot, but hopefully people were at least entertained. That's the main reason that you're here anyway. So
yeah, that's objective number one. Legacy Cube. We did go over a lot of it is just really similar to Vintage Cube. So if you're familiar with that, or you listen to our Vintage Cube podcast, you'll probably have the toughest time getting anything meaningful out of this if you're trying to cube for the first time and for some reason you deem Legacy Cube the most appropriate way to do that. Probably have to spend some time studying a lot of written material anyway, because a lot of what's going on here is not very intuitive and is based off of over 20 years of card design. So it'll be kind of tough mudding, but there's plenty of streams you can check out. I do write the articles at StarCityGames.com, which will get you a little less nonsense and more of a concrete strategic dive into this sort of thing. And I really hope to see a lot of the changes that we talked about, some support for sacrifice themes and things of that nature is the direction I would like to see the Legacy Cube go in the future.
Yeah, I'm fully in agreement on that one. Well, I think we're good then. So Ryan, why don't you finish doing your plugs?
Yeah, so you can find all my tweets at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter. I've been actually cubing in paper, so I've been talking about that a little, working on more 180 card cube stuff and all that sort of thing you can find in my articles on StarCityGames.com. I do also do the breakdowns of the digital cubes, the Magic Online cubes, as they are released into the program. I do not know when the next release will be, so I'll be a little bit more creative in what I'm putting out in the coming weeks. At this point in time, I don't actually know what this week's article is. So again, expect all kinds of stuff.
I love it. Get creative, get weird with it.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna, as long as it includes Elder Gargaroth, I think we're in good shape.
That's what the people want. Tell us about you, Justin.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, where I always like to say where I'm the most active, and I'm putting huge air quotes around that because I have not been incredibly active on Twitter over the last year. But either way, that is where I'm the most active. I will say stuff every now and again. And if you want to reach me, I will certainly respond if I'm tagged in something. So at jparnell1 over on Twitter. And you can find my other podcast, Think Twice, by searching Think Twice MTG on any audio platform, including the one you're listening to right now. And of course, Commander Versus every week on YouTube, as well as me streaming twice a week on twitch.tv/jparnell. I have been enjoying some Strixhaven Limited. Right, I don't know if you've had a chance to get into Strixhaven Limited at all.
I've birded a little. I have played none.
I think it's a pretty interesting format, but I also think that there might be a plateau that I'm going to be reaching very soon, to where I have explored the entirety of the format and it will no longer be interesting. But for now, I haven't hit it quite yet. I think I might be a draft or two away of doing that.
One more lesson to learn.
Yeah, one more lesson to learn. I think the last lesson I need to learn is how to draft a Lorehold deck that is on par with any of the other four schools. But I also think that lesson may not exist, and I might be chasing a ghost.
That is sometimes the case.
So, yeah. So anyway, twitch.tv/jparnell. And of course, if you want to subscribe to the 540, you could do so on any of the podcast applications that you're listening to, and other ones like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, Stitcher, YouTube, or just any local podcast app that you might have on your phone, your tablet. Anything that you can do to spread the word of the 540 is always quite helpful. So that includes leaving a review, either clicking your little star buttons on there. 5 is the best number, as we all know. But even leaving just a little comment saying that you love the 540 and love what we do. And honestly, anything that you can do to let us know your feedback, of course, on Twitter, both of the places that Ryan and I outlined, and on YouTube. Those are great places for us to get feedback so we can kind of identify what future things you might want us to do so we can mold this podcast to be the best Cube podcast that we can possibly make it.
Indeed.
And that is it for the 540 this week. Thank you all for listening, and we will catch you next time.